13 different cancers, one habit, $0. Right now. While you are sitting here watching this, your immune system is supposed to be hunting down abnormal cells in your body. Cells with broken DNA. Cells that could become cancer. Your body does this every single day, or at least it is supposed to. But here is what I need you to understand. After the age of 60, the immune cells responsible for finding and killing those abnormal cells, they go quiet. Not all at once, slowly, gradually. The way a security camera goes dark when nobody replaces the batteries. And 90% of people over 60 have no idea this is happening because nobody told them. Not in any appointment, not in any pamphlet. But here's the part that changes everything. The single most powerful tool to reactivate that immune surveillance system is not a medication. It is not a supplement. It is not anything that costs money at all. And I can prove it. I am Dr. Joe, board-certified oncologist. 25 years at Memorial Sloan Kettering and cancer centers across this country. I have looked at more pathology slides than I can count. I have sat with families getting the news no family should ever have to receive. And for 25 years, I asked myself the same question over and over again. What should I have done differently? I have an answer now, and I am going to give it to you today. Not in the vague way you have probably heard it before, with the exact mechanisms, the exact dose, the exact mistake that wipes out every benefit, and the exact week-by-week timeline of what happens in your body when you start. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. Has a doctor ever sat down with you and explained exactly why physical movement directly changes your cancer risk at the cellular level? Not just said, try to exercise. Actually explained why? Type yes or no in the comments right now. I read every single one, and I already know what most of you are going to type. Stay with me, because what I am about to share in the next 40 minutes changed the way I counsel every patient I see. And it starts with something that happened in my clinic 11 years ago. Sandra is 67 years old, retired postal worker from Virginia. She represents a pattern I have seen dozens of times in my practice. She walked 32 hours a week for nearly 4 decades delivering mail. Then she retired, and within 18 months, a routine checkup found something her doctor did not expect. I will come back to Sandra, because what her case revealed about the relationship between movement and cancer risk is something I think about every single week. But first, I need to show you what is actually happening inside your body right now, because without this foundation, everything else sounds like generic advice, and you deserve more than generic advice. Here is the biological reality that most people never hear in a 7-minute appointment. Every single day, your body creates new cells, billions of them, and every time a cell divides, there is a chance for a copying error, a mutation. This is not abnormal. This is biology. This has been happening since the day you were born. In a younger body, 3 systems catch those errors before they become dangerous. Think of them as 3 security checkpoints. Checkpoint 1, DNA repair enzymes that find mutations and fix them. Checkpoint 2, natural killer cells. Your immune system's frontline soldiers that patrol the body, identify abnormal cells, and destroy them. Checkpoint 3, apoptosis. That is the process where a damaged cell receives a signal and destroys itself before it can replicate and spread. 3 checkpoints, running simultaneously, quietly protecting you every hour of every day. But here is what happens after 60. All 3 systems slow down, not dramatically, not overnight, slowly enough that you do not notice. DNA repair enzymes become less efficient. Natural killer cells decline in both number and function. And the apoptosis mechanism, it becomes sluggish, less responsive, like a smoke alarm with failing batteries that still technically works, but only catches the biggest fires. The margin for error gets smaller every year. And here is what the medical system has consistently failed to tell you. The slowdown in these 3 systems is not inevitable. It is not simply age. It is substantially driven by something behavioral, something you control. I want to be careful here, because I have seen this framed badly 1,000 times. People hear this and they feel blamed, like their cancer risk is their fault. It is not. You could not have known this. Almost nobody explained it clearly. This is a system failure, not yours. The system that trained physicians to treat disease, not prevent it. The system that schedules 7-minute appointments and never leaves room for conversations like this one. The system that generates no revenue from telling you about a 20-minute walk. That is the real problem. And understanding it is the first step toward working around it. So, what is the tool that directly restores all three cancer defense systems simultaneously? Consistent, moderate physical activity. Now, I saw some of you just exhale and think, I knew it was going to be exercise. I already know that. You do not know what I am about to tell you about it, because the popular understanding of exercise and cancer prevention is so vague, so oversimplified, that it causes most people to either do too little or give up because they believe they are doing it wrong. I am going to give you the real picture, the one from the research, the one I give my own patients. But before I get into the mechanisms, let me finish introducing you to Sandra. Sandra walked an average of 6 miles a day for 38 years. When she retired, she went from 32 hours of walking per week to almost nothing. She had earned it. She worked hard. She wanted to rest. 18 months later, her annual checkup flagged something concerning. Not cancer, precancer. Her doctor noted some cellular abnormalities that needed monitoring. And Sandra sat across from me in my consultation room and said something that I have quoted to colleagues and students many times since. She said, "Dr. Joe, I was active my whole career. I thought I was protected." She had tears in her eyes, and she was not wrong to feel what she felt. She had been active, but the protection she had built over decades, it had begun to erode the moment the movement stopped. Because, as I am going to show you, the cancer protective effect of physical activity is not a stored reserve. It is a daily signal, like feeding your immune system every morning. Stop feeding it, and it starts to weaken. I will come back to Sandra in a few minutes. Because what happened over the next 6 months, that is the part I want you to hold on to. But right now, I need to show you the 3 mechanisms, the 3 biological reasons why consistent moderate movement is the most evidence-backed cancer preventive behavior available to any person over 60. Mechanism number 1, physical activity and DNA repair. Here is what I need you to understand about the inside of every cell in your body. Every cell contains roughly 3 billion base pairs of DNA. 3 billion. And when cells divide, all of that has to be copied perfectly. It almost never is. Errors happen. Most are trivial. A few are dangerous. The job of repairing those errors belongs to a family of enzymes, proteins with names like PARP and XPA. Their job is to patrol the DNA strand, find the breaks and mismatches, and fix them before the cell can divide and pass the error forward. After 60, these repair enzymes slow down. They make more mistakes. They miss more errors. And more errors slip through to become precancerous cells. Now here's the part most doctors never have time to explain. A 2022 meta-analysis published in the journal Cancer Epidemiology, Biomarkers and Prevention looked at physically active versus sedentary older adults of the same age. The results were striking. Physically active individuals showed significantly higher DNA repair capacity. Not marginally, significantly. And the effect was most pronounced in older adults, the exact population whose repair capacity needs the most support. The biological pathway runs partly through PARP, the enzyme I mentioned. Physical activity has been shown to increase PARP activity directly. It also reduces oxidative stress, which is the process that generates the DNA damage in the first place, by upregulating your body's own internal antioxidant systems. Think of it this way. Imagine your DNA repair crew as a small team maintaining a long stretch of highway. The highway has cracks and potholes forming constantly. After 60, the team gets smaller and slower. Exercise does 2 things simultaneously. It adds more workers to the crew, and it reduces the rate at which new damage appears. Less damage entering the system, more capacity to fix what does enter, both at the same time. Pay close attention to this next number. The reduction in cancer-causing DNA mutations in physically active older adults compared to sedentary older adults of the same age is not small. Studies have shown reductions in oxidative DNA damage markers of 30 to 40%. 30 to 40%. Not from a drug, not from a supplement, from consistent moderate movement. Let that sink in. Mechanism number 2, natural killer cell activation. I want you to picture your immune system as a military force. And within that force, there is a special unit, fast, relentless. Their job is not to wait for orders. Their job is to patrol, constantly, looking for cells that display abnormal surface markers. the biological equivalent of a flag that says, "This cell has gone wrong." These are your natural killer cells, NK cells. And they are, in my opinion, the most underappreciated cancer-fighting system your body has. Here is how they work. A precancerous cell, a cell that has accumulated enough mutations to be dangerous, begins to display different surface proteins, different enough that your natural killer cells can identify them as threats. When they do, they attach to the abnormal cell and inject proteins that cause it to self-destruct. This happens thousands of times a day in a healthy body, quietly, without any symptoms, without any awareness on your part. Natural killer cells doing their job, eliminating cellular threats before they can become tumors. Now here is the crisis. After 60, natural killer cell count declines. Their cytotoxicity, their ability to actually kill the abnormal cells they find, also declines. The patrol force gets smaller and less effective, and the abnormal cells that would have been caught and eliminated at 45 are more likely to slip through at 65. This is one of the primary biological reasons cancer incidence rises sharply after 60, not just because more errors are occurring, because the surveillance system that catches errors is operating below capacity. And here is what the research shows about movement. A study published in the Journal of Applied Physiology found that a single 30-minute session of moderate exercise increased circulating natural killer cell count by up to 50% in the hours following activity. 50% from one session, but that is the short-term effect. The more important finding for long-term cancer prevention is what happens with consistent activity. Chronically active older adults, people who move regularly over months and years, show significantly higher natural killer cell cytotoxicity than sedentary adults of the exact same age. Not temporarily elevated, permanently upgraded. The surveillance system does not just improve after each session. It upgrades structurally with consistent activity, like rebuilding the patrol force. More soldiers, better trained, more effective at the job. This is the mechanism most oncology researchers point to when explaining why physically active populations show lower cancer incidence across so many different cancer types. The immune system is catching more. More abnormal cells are being identified and eliminated before they develop into clinical disease. If you are finding this helpful so far, and I hope you are, hit like right now so the algorithm can show this video to someone who needs it. This kind of information saves lives, and it should reach more people than it currently does. Now, I need to be honest with you about something before I continue, because it is actually relevant to Sandra's story. I know the word exercise carries a lot of weight. For some of you, it brings up memories of programs that felt impossible, gyms that were intimidating, bodies that felt like they were working against you. I hear that from patients constantly, and I want you to know, what I am describing has nothing to do with that. This is not about gyms. Not about programs, not about any standard of fitness that someone else defined for someone half your age. What I am describing is movement, consistent, moderate, daily movement, and I will show you exactly what that looks like in a minute. But first, mechanism number 3, and this is the one I consider most important, the one I wish every oncologist had time to explain to every patient over 60. Chronic inflammation and the cancer environment. Here is a truth that changed how I think about cancer prevention. Tumors do not grow in healthy tissue. They grow in tissue that is already damaged, already inflamed, already creating the biological conditions that allow abnormal cells not just to survive, but to thrive. Cancer is not simply a story of a single rogue cell that appears from nowhere. It is a story of a cell that went wrong, in an environment that allowed it to keep going wrong. An environment characterized by persistent, unresolved, low-grade inflammation. Now I need to be crystal clear about what I mean by inflammation. I am not talking about the redness you see when you cut your finger. That is acute inflammation, your body's emergency response. That is healthy and necessary. I am talking about something invisible, silent, chronic. A low-level inflammatory state that persists in the body day after day, month after month, year after year. Characterized by elevated levels of molecules called interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, and C-reactive protein. When these markers are chronically elevated, they create a tissue environment that is permissive to cancer. They damage DNA. They suppress the apoptosis response. They promote the formation of blood vessels that feed tumors. and they signal cancer cells to keep dividing rather than destroying themselves. Here is what most people do not know. Sedentary behavior, not just the absence of exercise, but prolonged inactivity, is an independent driver of this chronic inflammation. A body that sits for most of the day maintains chronically elevated baseline inflammatory markers. The tissue environment that results is precisely the environment where cancer is most likely to establish itself. And consistent moderate physical activity is the single most evidence-backed non-pharmaceutical intervention known to reduce chronic systemic inflammation. Regular movement reduces circulating interleukin-6. It reduces CRP. It reduces tumor necrosis factor alpha. It increases anti-inflammatory signaling molecules, and it reduces visceral adipose tissue, the abdominal fat that is itself a major source of inflammatory signals, even in people who do not lose significant weight. Think of it this way. Chronic inflammation is like a slow fire burning in the walls of your house. You cannot see it, you cannot smell it, but it is creating the conditions for something catastrophic. Every day of consistent moderate movement is a day you are turning down the heat on that fire. Not putting it out entirely, turning it down, steadily, persistently. And every day of inactivity is a day the fire burns a little hotter. This is the third mechanism, and combined with the DNA repair effect and the natural killer cell activation effect, what you have in front of you is a single daily behavior that simultaneously reduces the damage entering your cancer defense system, upgrades the surveillance system catching threats, and changes the tissue environment from one that enables cancer to one that resists it. Now let me come back to Sandra. This is where her story gets important. After that consultation, Sandra and I talked for almost an hour. I explained exactly what I just explained to you, the mechanisms, the research, and I gave her a specific protocol, not a gym program, not a fitness goal, a movement protocol. She committed to it fully. And I want to tell you what happened at her 6-month follow-up, because it is the most meaningful kind of evidence there is. But before I do, I need to address the mistake. The single most common mistake that eliminates most of the cancer preventive benefit of physical activity. Because if you miss this part, the protocol I am about to give you will not work the way the research shows it should. Here is what nobody tells you. Intensity matters, but not in the direction most people think. Most people who decide to start exercising for health reasons, they go too hard, too fast, too consistently. High-intensity workouts, pushing into breathlessness. And for cancer prevention specifically, this is the wrong approach. Not because intensity is harmful in general, but because the immune benefit curve for cancer prevention peaks at moderate intensity and begins to decline at very high intensities. Research examining the relationship between exercise intensity and immune function found something that surprised even seasoned researchers. While moderate exercise robustly stimulates natural killer cell activity and anti-inflammatory pathways, very high-intensity exercise, the kind that leaves you unable to hold a conversation, produces a transient immunosuppressive effect in the hours after the session. This is called the open window, a period of temporarily reduced immune function following exhaustive exercise. It is well documented in exercise immunology research. And for cancer surveillance, this is a problem. You want your immune system consistently active, not repeatedly suppressed and recovered. The optimal zone for cancer preventive benefit is moderate intensity, an effort level at which you can hold a conversation, but you are slightly breathless, brisk walking, cycling at a comfortable pace, swimming, dancing, gardening sustained for 20 minutes or more. Any activity that raises your heart rate to approximately 50 to 70% of its maximum. And here's the critical finding from the data. 5 20-minute moderate sessions spread across the week provide more immunological and anti-inflammatory benefit than 2 intense gym sessions. Frequency outweighs intensity for cancer prevention every single time. I need you to remember that, because it changes the math completely for people who feel they cannot commit to long or intense exercise. You do not need to. 20 minutes, moderate pace, most days. That is the protocol. Let me now show you exactly what that looked like for Sandra. Sandra began with 15-minute walks, morning, before anything else. She told me later that the first 3 days felt almost pointless. She barely broke a sweat. Her neighborhood was flat. She did not feel like she was doing anything meaningful. I had warned her about this, because I warn every patient. Week 1 is going to feel too easy. That is intentional. Your goal in week 1 is to establish the behavior, not to feel the burn. The biological changes are already beginning. You just cannot feel them yet. By day 4, she added a second walk, short after lunch, just 10 minutes around the block, not because I told her to, because she wanted to. By the end of week 2, she told me she was sleeping better. That part surprised her. I was not surprised. NK cell activity restoration correlates strongly with improved sleep quality. The two systems reinforce each other. Week 3. This is the week I call the breakthrough week. This is when most patients call me, or in Sandra's case, send me a message. She wrote, "Dr. Joe, something is different. I do not know how to explain it, but I feel like my body is back." That is not poetic language. That is the biological reality of immune system restoration, expressing itself through lived experience. At her 6-month follow-up, the cellular abnormalities that had concerned her doctor at the prior checkup had not progressed. In fact, her inflammatory markers, CRP and interleukin-6, had both returned to the normal range from elevated baselines, and her natural killer cell activity, which I had measured at that first consultation, had increased by 34%. 34% increase in natural killer cell function from walking. At 67 years old, her doctor called it unexpectedly encouraging. I called it biology working exactly as the research says it should. Sandra said something to me at that appointment that I have shared with patients dozens of times since. She said, "I walked every day of my working life, and I never once thought about what it was doing to protect me. I thought it was just my job. Now I know it was my medicine. Now I need to address something before I continue." Sandra's case represents the pattern I have seen in dozens of patients. But I want to be honest with you the way any good doctor should. Not everyone responds at the same rate. Some people see changes faster, some slower. Her 34% NK cell improvement was on the higher end of what I typically observe. Your results may differ. What the research consistently shows is the direction. The direction is clear, and that direction is the same for every person who implements consistent moderate movement. Inflammation down, natural killer cells up, DNA repair capacity up. How much up? That varies. The direction does not. Now I want to address something directly, because I know what some of you are thinking right now. You are thinking, "I have heard that exercise is good for me my entire life. Doctors have been saying this for decades. Why is what you are telling me any different?" That is a fair question, and I want to give you a real answer. Here is the difference. What you have been told before is that exercise is good for you in general, for heart health, for weight, for mood. That framing is not wrong, but it is incomplete in a way that costs people their cancer protection. When movement is framed as generally healthy, it becomes optional, a nice to have, something people do when they have time, when the weather is good, when they feel motivated, and when life gets hard, it is the first thing that drops. But when you understand the biological mechanism, when you know that your natural killer cells are declining right now without a consistent movement signal, when you know that your tissue inflammatory environment is being set daily by whether or not you moved, the framing changes completely. It stops being a lifestyle choice. It becomes maintenance, like taking medication, like eating, like sleeping. That is what I want to give you today. Not permission to exercise. The understanding that makes walking non-negotiable. Now, stay with me for another few minutes because I want to show you something about how the research plays out across different activity types. Because I get asked this constantly. Does it have to be walking? No. Here is what the research shows matters. The intensity zone, not the activity type. The moderate intensity zone, 50 to 70% of your maximum heart rate, is where the cancer protective mechanisms activate most robustly. Any activity that keeps you in that zone for sustained periods produces the effect. Brisk walking, swimming, cycling at a comfortable pace, dancing, gardening, active housework, even certain yoga flows that maintain elevated heart rate. What does not count, and I say this gently, is casual strolling. A slow walk around the living room, standing more instead of sitting. These are better than nothing. But they do not meaningfully activate the 3 mechanisms I described. You need sustained, moderate effort, 20 consecutive minutes at conversational pace. That is the threshold where the research shows consistent immunological benefit. Now, There is one more thing I want to show you before I give you the full protocol. And I almost did not include this because it is the part of the research that I find most sobering. But you need to know it. The research does not just show what happens when people are active. It shows what happens when people stop. When previously active people become sedentary. Natural killer cell activity begins to decline within 2 weeks of stopping consistent activity. 2 weeks. The inflammatory markers begin to creep back up. The DNA repair enzyme activity begins to reduce, and the tissue environment begins to shift back toward the inflammatory state that is permissive to cancer. This is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to explain why consistency is the word I keep coming back to, not intensity. Consistency. A body that has moved for 20 minutes every single day for 3 years has a fundamentally different cancer defense system than a body that spent those 3 years doing occasional intense exercise, separated by long periods of inactivity. Daily, moderate, consistent, that is the formula. Now I want to return to Sandra one more time, because there is a part of her story I have not told you yet. Week 3 of Sandra's protocol, the breakthrough week I mentioned. She told me later that it almost did not happen. On day 17, she woke up with a headache, a bad one. She almost skipped the walk. She lay in bed and thought about all the reasons it made sense to rest. She walked anyway, just 15 minutes, down the block and back, and she told me that 15-minute walk on a day I almost stayed in bed became the most important walk of the entire 6 months. Not because of what it did physically, but because of what it proved to her, that the habit was stronger than the excuses. Day 4 through day 14 is where most people quit. I want you to know that now. If you hit a hard day in that window, you are not failing. You are exactly where every person who eventually succeeds once was. Push to week 3. What you will find waiting for you there is worth more than I can put into words. Now I want to go deeper, because understanding the 3 mechanisms is powerful, but understanding the full scope of what the research shows across 13 cancer types, that is what I think truly changes behavior. I mentioned 13 different cancers at the very beginning of this video. I want to show you where that number comes from, and what it means for your health specifically. A landmark meta-analysis published in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute, one of the most respected publications in oncology, examined data from over 1.44 million adults. 1.44 million. That is not a small study. That is the kind of data that rewrites guidelines. The researchers found that higher levels of leisure time physical activity were associated with significantly lower risk across 13 distinct cancer types. Colon cancer. Risk reduction of 16%. Breast cancer, 10% lower risk. Endometrial cancer, 18%. Kidney cancer, 17%. Gastric cancer, 22%. Bladder cancer, 13%. Esophageal cancer, 22%. Myeloid leukemia, 20%. Myeloma, 17%. Head and neck cancers, 15%. And for some cancers, the reduction was even more striking. Liver cancer, 27% lower risk. Lung cancer in non-smokers, 26%. Rectum specifically, 13%. These are not small effects, across 1.44 million people, and the researchers attributed most of these effects to exactly the mechanisms I showed you: reduced inflammation, enhanced immune surveillance, improved DNA repair capacity. Now here is the question I want you to sit with. If a drug produced these results across 13 cancer types simultaneously, with no side effects, costing nothing, it would be front-page news. There would be clinical trials, there would be prescriptions written, there would be press conferences. But because it is a behavior, it gets mentioned briefly at the end of an appointment, you are already late leaving, if it gets mentioned at all. That gap between what the research shows and what people actually get told in the healthcare system is exactly why I make videos like this one. And here is the one thing I did not tell you yet. The thing I want you to pay particular attention to. The data does not just show that active people have lower cancer risk than sedentary people. It shows something even more important for those of you who have not been active in a while. Going from sedentary to moderately active produces risk reductions almost as large as the difference between sedentary and highly active. Read that again. The biggest gain in cancer protection does not come from going from active to very active. It comes from going from inactive to active. The first 20 minutes you add to your week matter more biologically than the difference between someone who walks 4 hours a week and someone who walks 6. This is where the system has failed you most. Because the message you have received, if you have received any message at all, is that you need to do more. More exercise, more intensity, more commitment than you currently have. The real message, the one the data actually supports, is this: starting matters. Even a little. Even now. Even at 67 or 72 or 78. Do not let anyone tell you it is too late. It never is. Now let me give you the specific protocol, because I am not going to give you vague guidance and send you off to figure it out yourself. That is what the 7-minute appointment does. You deserve more than that. Here is exactly what the research supports, and exactly what I tell my own patients. The target is 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week. 150 minutes. That sounds like a lot, until you break it down. 150 minutes across 7 days is 21 minutes per day. 21 minutes. That is a walk around 2 blocks. Now, here is where I need to be very specific about what moderate intensity means, and it is simpler than it sounds. Moderate intensity is the pace at which you can hold a conversation, but you would not be comfortable singing. Your breathing is elevated. You are aware of the effort, but you are not gasping. You are not pushing into discomfort. If you cannot hold a conversation, you are working too hard for this protocol. Slow down. I am serious. Too much intensity actually reduces the cancer protective effect by temporarily suppressing the natural killer cell activity you are trying to build. Now, before I go further, I need to say something important, and I need you to hear it. If you are currently on any prescription medications, particularly blood thinners like warfarin or aspirin therapy, please note that moderate physical activity is generally safe and encouraged alongside these. However, if you are on medications that affect heart rate or blood pressure, beta blockers especially, your heart rate response to exercise will be different. The conversation-based intensity guide is more reliable for you than any heart rate percentage. If you have had a cardiac event in the last 12 months, or if you have been told your heart function is compromised, please have a specific conversation with your physician before starting this protocol. Start shorter, 10 minutes, and build gradually under their guidance. Never start or stop any prescribed medication based on anything you hear in this video. This is educational information. Your doctor manages your medications. For everyone else, here is the week-by-week expectation. Week 1. This is going to feel too easy. That is by design. Your body is not accustomed to the signal. You are establishing the pattern, not the performance. Walk 15 to 20 minutes each day, same time if possible. Morning works best for habit formation. Do not push. Do not add intensity. Just show up. You will probably feel very little different physically at the end of week 1. This is normal. The changes at the cellular level are already beginning. You just cannot feel them. Natural killer cells are mobilizing. Inflammatory markers are beginning to respond, but you will not notice this. That is fine. Week 2. Add a second session on at least 2 days, or extend your daily session to 25 minutes. Your body begins adapting. You may notice your sleep improving. This is one of the earliest signs that the biological shift is underway. Natural killer cell restoration and sleep quality improvements are tightly correlated. Week 3. This is the breakthrough week. In my experience, and in Sandra's experience, this is the week when patients call or message to tell me something feels different. Energy is noticeably better. The walk has started to feel natural rather than effortful. This is the week most people go from doing this to wanting to do this. If you hit a difficult day in weeks 1 or 2, I am telling you now, push through to week 3. Most people who quit do so in days 4 through 12. They quit just before the breakthrough. Week 4 onward, continue. Do not add dramatically more intensity. Consistency is your protection. A year of 20-minute daily walks is more powerful for cancer prevention than 6 weeks of intense training followed by inactivity. The research is clear on this. The cancer protective effect of physical activity is dose-dependent over time, meaning the longer you maintain consistency, the more robust the immune upgrades become. Natural killer cell cytotoxicity continues to improve for months. Anti-inflammatory effect compounds. DNA repair capacity continues to improve. This is not a short-term intervention. It is a daily signal to your immune system, and like any signal, it has to keep being sent. Now, A few practical details because I promised specific guidance. Best time of day. Morning shows the strongest evidence for habit formation, but afternoon works perfectly well. What matters far more than the time of day is consistency. Same approximate time each day significantly improves habit adherence. What to do if you have joint pain? This is the most common question I receive about this protocol, and the answer surprises most people. Swimming and water walking produce identical or superior immunological benefits to land-based walking with dramatically less joint stress. If walking is painful, the pool is your protocol. You do not need to swim laps. Walking back and forth in waist-deep water for 20 minutes produces the same NK cell mobilization, the same anti-inflammatory effect, the same DNA repair activation. What about strength training? Strength training is a meaningful supplement, not a replacement. The anti-inflammatory and natural killer cell effects are most robustly documented for aerobic moderate intensity activity. Twice-weekly resistance exercises are a beneficial addition once your aerobic base is established, not before. And what about days when you truly cannot do 20 minutes? This one I want to be honest about. A 10-minute walk is not the same as a 20-minute walk immunologically, but it is dramatically better than no walk at all. On hard days, do 10, then add 10 more if you can. But always choose something over nothing. Here is what I want to leave you with from a purely scientific standpoint. The data from the Journal of the National Cancer Institute study showed something particularly important for viewers of this channel. Among adults who were initially sedentary and then became consistently moderately active over a period of 2 or more years, cancer mortality rates dropped by approximately 29%. 29% reduction in cancer mortality. From walking, not from a clinical trial drug, not from a supplement protocol. From deciding every morning to move for 20 minutes before anything else. Now let me bring this together clearly and practically. The 3 mechanisms through which consistent moderate physical activity directly protects against cancer after 60 are these. First, DNA repair enzyme activation. Physically active older adults show 30 to 40% reduction in oxidative DNA damage markers compared to sedentary adults of the same age. Second, natural killer cell function. Regular moderate exercise permanently upgrades NK cell cytotoxicity, the ability to identify and destroy precancerous cells. Chronic exercisers show significantly superior cancer surveillance capacity than sedentary peers of identical age. Third, chronic inflammation reduction. Consistent movement reduces interleukin-6, CRP, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, the inflammatory molecules that create the tissue environment in which cancer develops and thrives. The protocol is this: 150 minutes per week, 20 to 30 minutes, moderate intensity, conversational pace, most days of the week. Week 1 feels easy. Week 2, sleep improves. Week 3, something shifts. From that point forward, consistency is everything. The mistake to avoid is intensity, moderate, not hard. If you are breathless to the point of not being able to speak, you are reducing the immune benefit you are trying to build. And for Sandra, 6 months after she committed to this protocol, her precancerous cellular markers had not progressed. Her inflammation had returned to normal. Her natural killer cell function had increased by 34%. She sent me a note recently. She said, "I know I have more years of walking ahead of me, and now I know exactly why every one of those steps matters." I think about her every time I explain this to a new patient. And I think about you. What did you take from this today? Tell me in the comments. Specifically, what are you going to do differently starting tomorrow morning? Your answer might be exactly what someone else watching this video needed to read. And if this gave you something real, please share it, not to a general group, to one person. Your mother, your father, your spouse. Your friend who was just told they have precancerous cells and is trying to figure out what to do next. That one share may be one of the most important things you do for their health this month. If you watched the whole video, type "I finished" in the comments. Let me know you made it. I read everything. Subscribe if you have not already. Because next week I am covering something that I think is going to genuinely surprise most of you. There is a specific food that over 60% of people over 65 consume every single day. That research increasingly links to accelerated cancer cell growth, not one that most people consider dangerous. In fact, most people consider it healthy. The evidence against it is building, and I am going to show you all of it. That is next week. Do not miss it. Until then, move today, move tomorrow, move the day after. Your immune system is listening for the signal. Give it. References to all studies mentioned in this video are in the description below. Do not let anyone tell you it is too late. It never is.